coordinating today's project. Thank you to Adrian Ferguson. Thank you to Ocean Barenville. And thank you to Ms. Jolie Terrell, who is joining us virtually, I believe. So before we dive in, there are just a few housekeeping acknowledgements before we get started. First of all, I believe we're opening up with a land acknowledgement.
Yes, we would like to open up with a land acknowledgement, and we would like to begin by acknowledging that we are on the occupied ancestral lands of the Piscataway and Anacostan people. And as we enter into this global moment of reckoning the responsibilities associated with decolonization, we're very, very fortunate to be in this exhibition that tasks each of us with personalizing the call to decolonize. So as we're talking through this exhibition, as we're here in this global moment, and also during Native American Heritage Month, I hope that you all reflect on that.
So our conversation here will take about 60 minutes, and then afterwards we'll be opening up the floor for questions immediately after. After the discussion, the exhibition itself will be open and will be available for viewing for the hour following.
And purchasing.
So we definitely look forward to all of you taking in the work with the added context of everything that's going to be shared within this upcoming hour. Lastly, notes are highly encouraged. A few notepads and pens have been passed out, but a few more are available. If you'd like to pick up a few, they are in the back. We kindly ask that after the conversation is over, please tear off the pages of notes that you jotted down and just leave the remainder of the notepad behind. Awesome. So without further ado, it is an honor to introduce James Stephen Terrell and Zsudayka Nzinga. James Stephen Terrell is a native Washingtonian hailing from Ward 7. His parents are Reverend Dr. James E. Terrell, pastor of the historic Second Baptist Church of Washington, D.C., and retired Superior Court Associate Judge Mary A. Terrell of the Superior Court of Washington, D.C. He received his high school diploma from Nzinga College High School in Washington, D.C. He received a Bachelor of Fine Art in 1999 from Howard University, Master of Fine Arts in 2002 from Parsons School of Design in New York City, and the Master of Divinity degree from the Union Theological Seminary in New York City with a concentration on theology and the fine arts in 2006. While attending Union Theological Seminary, he pursued fine arts painting elective courses at Columbia University. Terrell has exhibited his work all over the country and has had multiple solo shows, including at museums. He has been teaching in the DC public charter school system for 15 years.
And we are also joined today by Zsudayka Nzinga, who is a multidisciplinary fine artist, curator, and arts educator from Aurora, Colorado, who now lives in Washington, D.C. She utilizes her practice as a cultural anthropologist to reflect American culture through mixed media portraiture and interior design installations. Nzinga's murals and public works promote pride and connection. Her figures express joy, hope, and the love of everyday life. Her principal subjects are Black women, and she utilizes these portraits as an opportunity to highlight the beauty of American culture. She currently serves as Vice President of Black Artists of DC, a 501c3 arts organization for Black African identified artists in the DC area, and has been featured on multiple news outlets, including Voice of America and Washington Post. And it is also important to share for those who don't know that James and Zsudayka are also married, and they have 3 beautiful children together.
Thank you both so much for being here with us today. As some of us might know, the title of the show is Watermelon, Chicken, and Cornbread. We're super excited to get into the details of the work. But first of all, we'd love to hear from you. What was the thought process in naming the show and kind of the thesis for what the show is exploring?
All right. So I had a show 2 years ago at the McLean Art Center. And in the show, there was 3 artists, me and 2 other people. And I forget the lady's name, but she had some silhouette pieces, like Carol Walker's work.
And she was white.
Right. She was white. But her work was like Carol Walker. And we had a Zoom meeting where she was discussing her work. And in her work, she talked about how her work represents the African American culture. And we were like, And she goes on to explain that in one piece, there was a piece that dealt with black women who were selling fried chicken for the freedom of their people. So she did the research and found out that there were women who were, black women who at that time period, 1800s, were able to sell chicken and able to buy the freedom of their people. And so we got into a discussion about that.
He's being generous. I was mad. I was like, who is this person? And why does she feel like she has the right to tell this story? And then I went to research it, and I found out that she was right. She still has no right to tell this story. But she was right. It turns out that a lot of families were able to buy their freedom from families on plantations were allowed to grow certain foods and to keep certain animals, and chickens were one of the animals that they were allowed to keep. And so instead of just having these things and using them to care for themselves, they started to monetize them. And they would go and when the trains came in, there was no restaurants around the train stations at that time. There was no cafe car in the train. As a matter of fact, the only reason why there is a cafe car in your Amtrak train is because so many black women made so much money and bought their families freedom that it became against the law to sell food at the train stations. And so that revelation was like really groundbreaking for us, because it's like we're thinking about, you know, I've heard people say that they don't eat chicken in front of white people and like things like that. And just being like, whoa, wait a minute, like chicken saved a lot of families and got freedom for a lot of families. And so then what?
Oh, yeah. So then we researched that more, got into discussion about that food and family. And then there was an article in the newspaper about a school that went.
This has been a journey, y'all, so I was trying to understand like why this was such a journey for us to name it something that was so like eyebrow raising. So then I had an exhibition at the Liberty Museum in Philadelphia, and I was tasked with building a home space that was reflective of Black American culture. And in doing that, I went into a lot of research, and I wanted everything in the house to have some sort of significance or some sort of callback. I didn't want anything to be accidental. And so I ended up, there's a brother who's from Aurora named Adrian Miller, who is one of the leading Black American culinary researchers. And we have a mutual friend. And so that friend hooked us up, and I ordered all his books. He has 3 books about Black American culinary history. And I placed those books in the exhibition. And later in the exhibition, so the other people, you know, they're like, there's one lady who was Jewish, there's a Hispanic lady, or Hispanic person, people who had different specific cultures. And so they wanted to have, it was over the summer, they wanted to have events that highlighted the cultures. And so, you know, here comes Juneteenth. And they were like, hey, you know, we want to serve some food for Juneteenth. What are things that we can serve that are from your culture? And my immediate question was, well, how are you presenting who chose the food? Because if it's National Liberty Museum presents this Juneteenth event and we're serving chicken and watermelon, that is very different than this artist chose. And they said they wanted to serve chicken and watermelon. And it was like an aha moment for me, because they didn't even think about that. Like that wasn't, if I had said, yeah, let's do chicken and watermelon, and they would have gotten chicken and watermelon and put it out and possibly had a problem on their hands. So now,
Yeah, so then after that discussion, trying to find what food to present there, there was an article that came out about a school, it was a Black History Month? Black History Month at a school that served chicken and watermelon to the students. And there was a big uproar, upheaval about it. And so that came a discussion with us again.
So now we're like arguing back and forth in this like weird internet where everybody's like an e-thug scholar and and just asking the honest question like, why are y'all offended? Because if I'm going to an event in an event about Black folks, I would like some chicken. And that's just real. Like I want some good chicken. I want some good fried chicken. And we all know what good fried chicken is. I'm personally allergic to watermelon, so I'm cool on that. But like my friends, my kids want watermelon. They want to come to the art show. They want some watermelon. If I go to a Black event and they don't have chicken, I'm perturbed. And if we're real, aren't all y'all? Like, if you go to a Black event and they're not serving chicken and, like, some of those staples, like, we're like, what's going on with y'all? Like, where y'all come from? Why are y'all, if there's raisins in the, we always make jokes about, there's raisins in the potato salad and, like, all of that. Like, we do have specific culinary things that we like, and I do want fried chicken at a Black event. Like, period. There's nothing wrong with that. But the confrontation of that was, like, very rough online because a lot of people feel opposed to that ideal. And so I have been friends with Bomani Arma for 20 plus years. I've known him forever. And he has Watermelon Day, as many people know. And he asked, because he saw us kind of engaging in this discourse, so he asked me to do a painting for Watermelon Day for this past one that took place in August. And so I drew up 2 sketches, and I painted one, and he wanted to get on one, so we painted it together. And it is a masterpiece, y'all. It is a master class in art, and it was a master class for us. Like, it was the type of painting that was transformative. Like, we were just passing it back and forth, and then, like, looking at it finished one night, I was like, this is a really amazing painting. Like, I was learning about myself as an artist from looking at the ways that our 2 styles were interacting. So I was so excited to post it, and we put it up.
It's supposed to be in the show.
It was. I sold it. Sorry, y'all.
It was the first piece for the show.
But we put it up, and they lit me up in my inbox. Both pieces sold. Both pieces were supposed to be. No, they was lighting me up in my inbox. They was talking about we were racist, and aren't we racist? It's so racist. You painted a bunch of Black kids eating watermelon, and I was like, but my Black kids are eating watermelon right now. Like, y'all are being weird. So, do you have anything else to add before I wrap it? So, we ended up calling it watermelon chicken cornbread because I think that y'all are being weird. And like, and even saying that, like when I say to people like, oh, the show's called Watermelon Chicken Cornbread, they like, all y'all is eating watermelon. You going home right now to eat watermelon chicken and cornbread. Like, why are y'all being weird about the fact that Black people like watermelon chicken and cornbread? Like, what is wrong with that? Well, it isn't all people thing, but I think that it's important to be clear about the imagery that's associated with it when we think about Black people.
Yeah, why it was brought up, why the imagery changed in the 1800s.
And we'll let you back up. Sorry.
No, that's great.
Absolutely. The theme of context seems super central, and like this idea of reclamation is definitely coming up, and just in the context behind like the exhibition as well. With all that being said, there is specifically a piece here titled Reclamation. I'm curious as to if any of the pieces in the room have like a specific story attached to them, specifically for the piece itself.
The piece, The Last Supper, that we did together, I think that's an important piece. It speaks to the time period in terms of how Black folks used to sit at the table, or not just Black people, all people, and have dinner, have a conversation. I remember when I was growing up, I couldn't come to the table in pajamas or in sweatpants. I had to come to the table, shirt, pair of pants on, sit down and eat with my family. Back then there were no cell phones, but there was no TV on. We had to actually sit and talk and have a conversation with people at the table. And you could actually sit there with your head down eating and not say anything. It was a discussion about your day, their day, what's going on with you, what's going on with them. But ever since the whole cell phone, internet situation, that has seemed to die out in certain families. Everybody gets their plate and runs to their own separate rooms or separate parts of the house and eats.
I think reclamation sounds like a word I probably use. I forget the titles of all these paintings. Honestly, I only name paintings because y'all want the paintings to be named. I would call them 2003 number 1 and 2023 number 2. If I could. I can't remember all of them, but I think that is the one that's of our youngest daughter eating watermelon, and that I called it that because that's a real picture of her, like in real life in our actual kitchen, and she's just like eating the watermelon with the big eyes, looking up, and that's an image I think that has often traditionally been used to kind of make fun of us. When it's like, no, you really are looking at me with your big eyes and you love this watermelon, and she eats it like that. And I remember when I was growing up, if black kids eating watermelon like that, like somebody was like, stop, like don't do this in public. It was like a taboo type of thing. But it's just fruit, and like really thinking about it as just fruit, but then also thinking about we garden a lot, we grow a lot of food. I have attempted to grow watermelons for the past 7 years, but DC has a lot of animals. And Denver does not have animals like this. And so it's like every year I learn about a new set of animals that comes to my garden. It's a whole garden of it. And the watermelons are always the first to go. So I haven't had a successful watermelon patch yet. We've been like really super trying to make it happen, but just like in researching how to grow watermelons and like the best ways to grow watermelons, and understanding that watermelons were also used to buy freedom, that the culture of the black folks you see in trucks on the corner selling watermelons stems from people purchasing their freedom, growing food and saving money and buying loved ones. And like, so these things we have to take back and we have to reclaim them, and we have to feel pride when we see them. And even when there's art where it seems like they're making fun of us, we have to kind of reconnect to like, well, why are they making fun of us? Because there's no reason for them to make fun of us unless there's a reason why they want us to distance from certain things. And so thinking about that and like reclaiming that.
I would love for you to kind of address the subtext of respectability politics that are kind of floating under what you're saying about reclamation, about the stigmatization around eating chicken, eating cornbread, eating watermelon. Through creating this exhibition, what has it given you permission to enjoy and to reclaim? And has it extended permission to other people in your life to live in joy?
So I grew up in Aurora, Colorado, around a bunch of white folks. And so I think that there was a lot of like taboos in the time when I was growing up of things that you didn't do in front of white people and ways that you didn't present in front of white people. And my mom is from Tennessee. She was born in the 50s. My dad is from Chicago. He was born in the 50s. And so they came up underneath that civil rights experience of like, we're dressing up to go get beat by the police because we want to show them that we're human, and how that trickled into our childhoods of like that continued, like, hey, you're out in public around these white people, you want to be safe, and to be safe means that you need to present a certain way, which early on for me was difficult because I'm just not that type of person, and like I'm not a performative person at all. I'm a very like, you get what you get, but like that code switching and that sort of thing was like really big growing up. But there was a point for me where I was like, I'm not doing this for y'all no more. Like, if I'm gonna talk the way that I talk. I'm gonna talk to my people the way that we talk. We have a language that we talk in. Like, I remember having a job and the black meeting after the meeting. Every job has the black meeting after the meeting. Or like sometimes, you know, we be in a meeting and we're taking notes and the person leading the meeting says something and we would all, and everybody in the room who was black understood like there was a whole separate conversation happening. And I just got to a point where I was like, well, I'm not going to do the whole rest of my life on these two separate lived experiences. Like, this is a rich, important part of my culture, and y'all are going to experience it. So when I show up, I'm going to be in whatever colors I want to be in. I'm going to have on entirely too much oil, because that's what we do. You know, I'm going to dominate the whole energy in the room. I'm going to have big, crazy jewelry on that my homie made out of wires and stones, and my chakras is going to be aligned. Because that's what we do. And so, you know, I think that that's a big thing for me just in general, is like I'm not about to try to blend in anymore. Like, I'm not interested in that. I haven't been interested in that for a long time. My resume says that I am bilingual. And when they ask me what's the other language you speak, it is AAVE. And when if they side-eye me, I say something in black speak, and they're like, yeah, I don't know what that means. Exactly. But if I said it to my people, we know what that means. There's a full language that is behind my culture. There's a full, and Japanese people get to be who they are when they're around you. If they want to shake your hand and bow their head the way that they do in their culture, we respect that. We be like, oh, hello to you too. So why can't you do that to me? When I'm saying, like, this is my culture and this is what I do, like, why can't I get that same respect and interaction? So a lot of my artwork in general is about rejection of certain types of respectability, and that idea that a person has to show up a certain way to be valuable. And I think that it goes across the board. Even when I think about like the different types of black people that they are, like this conversation about like Sexy Red, for example, that everybody has, where they're like, she's such a bad representation. Well, I know Sexy Red. I've kicked it with her, and she was more educated and connected to the community than most of the people who I know that have PhDs and who are like all super, you know, highfalutin. I know a person who got 8 babies with 6 different baby daddies, and she'll give you a reading that will change your life. She sees things, she's perceptive in her own ways. So like, I don't think I'm against the like throwing away of people because they don't represent all that is respectable about blackness, and that I have to be the person who's like the representative of all things black, like the great Negroologist. And like, so I think that like this work in that way kind of challenges that notion of like, well, y'all said that we can't paint black people eating chicken, but I'm black and I eat chicken, so, and this is my kid. And then it takes some of the like, because how are you gonna say that I'm being racist when I'm painting my actual life? It's mine.
I guess my experience was different growing up in D.C. My father was an assistant pastor, I guess in the early 80s, at a church, First Baptist Church of Georgetown. It's a black church in Georgetown, surrounded by an all-white community, but it's been there for a long, long time. And so, on the different occasions after church, they would have fried chicken dinners. When they wanted to raise money, they would sell fried chicken dinners, macaroni and cheese, cornbread. And it was never a problem about being ashamed of what you're eating. They would have church picnics. They would bring big watermelons, cut them up. Everybody would eat them out in the Georgetown Park. And it was brought back some great memories, actually, for me.
Wait, before y'all ask your next question, I want to ask, sorry. Did y'all know that there's a history? Do you guys know where the man getting the biggest piece of the chicken comes from? That comes from church. Because pastors, after church, used to go to different church families' homes, and the church family whose home he picked was honored, and they would fry chicken for the pastor, and the pastor would sit at the head of the table, and he would get the biggest piece of chicken as an honor to him because he came to our homes. And if you were a single woman and the pastor was single and he chose your home, it was a courting method that was used, where you cook the best, if you have the best chicken and you serve the pastor the best chicken and the biggest piece of chicken, there's a courting situation that's happening. So like these things that we think are just like, oh, niggas love chicken. And sorry y'all, I use the N-word. But like, these things are rooted in deep history and ritual practices between us. It's cultural. Like, it's not just that your church likes the fried chicken. There's history to that. And, you know, when he's talking about how his churches, that was the way that they raised money, that is the truth for many black churches. That is the truth for a lot of civil rights movement fundraising, was rooted in these chicken dinners, these fish fries, these things that are so ghetto now, sustained us and have sustained us for centuries.
I love how much history and scholarship has gone into the work that you do at large, but also this exhibition specifically. And being in, I'm guessing, a mainly DC-based art audience, and you being a DC native, I'd be really interested in hearing from you, James, about the evolution of soul food and food culture in DC as you have lived here.
I don't really know about the evolution of it in general, but I've seen the evolution in my household. Growing up, my parents are from Alabama and Mississippi, and they would take us every summer up to my grandmother's house in Akron, Ohio. And I would sit there in her house all summer long. They would drop us off. Next morning they were gone. And they'd come back and get us right before school started the next term. And so we would sit there and I would watch my grandmother cook. And it was my mother's mother. My father's mother had passed. But my mother's mother would sit there and she would always cook every day. And I would watch her and how much time she put into making the food. And so this whole exhibition brought back a bunch of memories, but good memories of the importance of food in the family, being able to sit with my grandparents when they were alive and being able to understand the importance of how food brings people together.
Y'all remember how y'all mayor a couple years ago said she don't like mambo sauce? I just want to remind y'all that for next time when y'all vote. Because, like, I'm not even from here, and I was like, sis. Like, who let you text that out? It's like being in Philadelphia, and you might be a vegetarian, but you gonna go and take a bite out that cheesesteak and suck it up, because that is what the food culture is about. So that, like, those type of little things is always really interesting to me here. Yeah, but I thought it was interesting to see, like, something that was such a culturally relevant aspect of DC food culture, and like the leader of DC seeming like she wasn't connected to it when I'm not from here. And I'm not going to speak down on mambo sauce. Like, I've had terrible mambo sauce from places. I would never post that. Like, ugh, the mambo sauce is terrible in DC. Because DC gonna come for me. And I know that they're gonna come for me, you know? So.
I'm interested in James's experience as part of the church as well too, as the conversation is kind of circling his experience of food as a facilitator for community. And food is like as a designator for cultural experiences. A lot of the pieces in the room right now explore the ways in which community is facilitated around food. Specifically within the church, but even outside of the church as well. We're curious about how that's shown up in your personal life, how it shows up in your family. You mentioned about how the food culture has evolved even in your own household. So is that something that we can speak on a little bit today?
Well, I would say, first of all, a lot of my paintings that I have here are broken down geometrically, and that's to represent, going back to the black church, the stained glass window aspect of the approach to the windows, growing up being a son of a pastor. I've been to so many churches in my lifetime. And I would love, when I would go to churches, just to stare at the windows sometimes. And I like how the light shines through the windows, and I like the different shapes and the different color aspects and the different images that seem to pop forth through the images. And so I wanted to bring that back into our approach to this exhibition, but also to show the reverence to the food, like the spiritual aspect of the food, giving you spiritual nourishment to the flesh. So I wanted to approach it from that angle and give it a sense of, gratitude, because without food there is no life. Without water there is no life, but food is sustenance, and it keeps you in this body. And so I wanted to just show that aspect.
You mentioned the beauty of stained glass windows in black churches, but in
Not just black churches, also. I grew up in all Catholic schools my whole life, so I've seen a bunch of stained glass windows in Catholic churches too. And they're both the same. Well, not the same, but they're both very colorful. There are more images, I would say, more.
No, they're not more colorful. They're monastery glasses.
I like the guy Tiffany who used to make those stained glass windows. He was really, really well known. They were very expensive, and only the best. Well, I would not say best, but the most had the most money would have these Tiffany windows. And the church in Georgetown was one of the churches where I first got my look at stained glass windows, and they were made by Tiffany. And I started to research how he made them. I wanted to bring that back to how I broke the space up in these particular paintings.
Well, thank you for bringing Tiffany's name into the room. I was actually going to ask you about for both of you, who your work is in lineage with, in terms of scholarship, but also in terms of art heroes. While Daniel and I were talking about this, we brought up Alma Thomas, Sam Gilliam, and also I was talking to an audience member earlier, a beloved community member, and she mentioned how the works reminded her of quilting. So there's also that, relationship there.
So the aspect of quilting goes back to, I guess, during COVID, when I was stuck in the house, and I had a lot of time on my hands. I used to go to school every day, teach them, come home, see my kids, go to bed. But during COVID, I had plenty of time on my hands. I started to think about my childhood. And I started to go back, and I remembered how my grandmother, my father's mother, was a quilter. She was from Alabama, from Birmingham, where the G's Bend people are, who do the quilts. And so I asked him about, where are all the quilts now? And he showed me where the quilts were, and I looked at them. And I started to go back and research quilts, and I started to add those patterns also into what I was doing.
The lie detector determined that is a lie. Some of that is your personal truth, but Wifey here was like, hey, you've been doing these same paintings for a long time.
Oh, that's a different part.
Try something new. No, because it's different. Your work that's all in paint doesn't come across quilted at all. But I'm telling you this. So there's that part of your art that maybe you don't see, and I'm going to tell
So
you.
the ones you didn't see, before I did this series was just paintings. It had nothing to do with. So before the series here, I was working on paintings. Actually, I wasn't working on anything that much. During COVID time, I was in the routine of getting up, going to work, come home, see my kids for an hour, see my wife for about an hour, go to bed, wake up, do it again, every single day. And I was exhausted. And then COVID hit, and I was like, yes, I get a chance to stay home. But I didn't realize what staying home really meant when you have 3 kids and a wife. So I had to readjust everything. I had more of a respect for what she was doing because our kids are homeschooled. And I had no idea what she went through day to day. And I had to apologize to her and to my kids. But then we all became closer and more of a tight-knit family. I understood what it took to be able to get up every day and cook, and the kids want to talk, non-stop. They talk so much you can't even think. So, trying to be an artist around having children and being able to produce work is amazing, and I finally understood that. So one day we were talking, she said, you have this time period where you're off, I was still getting paid, but then I had to go to work. She said, use this time to produce a series of work. And so I produced a series of work, not just work, but it was just paintings. We had 2 series of work, so it's like over 60 paintings. Each series has 3, there's about 30 pictures in it. And then there's a new series now, so there's actually 3 series. So it's like, 120 pictures? That's a lot. But I had time, so I used that time. I think that was the blessing of that time period. And so then she came to me and said, use this time to produce this work. I produced it, and then we moved on to the series.
So then I told him, because I also grew up in a household where quilting was my first introduction to art. My mom was a seamstress, and being a seamstress had been passed down for multiple generations through the women in her family. It was the men who were seamstresses in your family. Or tailors, they call themselves tailors. But
That changed during the war.
she taught me how to sew when I was probably 4. We started making our first quilts, and so that material has always been an aspect of the way that I've approached my work. And so I was saying to him, like, hey, I've got all these textiles, like you should get into some textile work. Textiles like really popping right now. I think you would really like it, and it would just give you a break from the limitations of paint, and you can think about how to move with your paint beyond that. And then he started making these like really cool textile pieces. And so what was interesting about that process is the first watermelon piece that we did, when we met, he was an acrylic painter and I was an oil painter. And he was like, you should switch from oil to acrylic. So then I transitioned into an acrylic painter because acrylic dries faster, so you can do some other things with it. But then I had transitioned into doing really mixed media work. But I never was really like, I'm self-taught. And so I never was, I think that I leaned a lot on like line work and certain things in my portraiture. And so our first watermelon piece, he did all of the textile work and I did all of the painting. And that has kind of switched in the works that we do together, where there's times like where he's doing all the textile, I'm doing all the painting. Or like The Last Supper, which is a long, hilarious story. But I painted in the figures, but then I was like, well, I want to engage some of the background. I cut up my hands trying to cut up all these little shapes that he draws out. Because the way that he draws the pieces out is real ridiculous. And if you follow me on Facebook, you saw like I posted the text thread of when he sent me the sketch for The Last Supper, and like he sent it because he has a bigger version of it. And he was like, do you want to do a smaller one? And I said, sure. And then he drew it out, and while he was at his studio, he took a picture and sent it to me, and my response was literally, nigga, please. Because, like, I'm not cutting up all of these triangles and diamonds and circles. Like, no. Who's cutting up all these little pieces? And then he proceeded to, like, take the painting and do most of it and bring it back to me with these faces, which enraged me. Because I was like, if you just wanted me to, like, paint some floating faces and hands in your composition, then you should have just asked for that from the beginning rather than like me trying to conceptualize where I fit in this painting. And so I was like, I'm gonna just cover up all the little details that he had. I'm gonna take one piece of paper and I'm gonna cover all of that. And so it ends up being like really cool. It looks like I graffitied my name across his painting, and I really like it for that reason. So that dance that is happening with these like purple and blue flowers is really an act of rebellion against my husband. Very interesting. But so that I think that's why like a lot of these works come across as more quilted, is because that is something that both of us are engaging in our individual works as well as our works together.
As we talk a little bit just about the technical details of the work, it is really amazing how the technical quality of the work parallels the symbolism of the thesis of the work in terms of decolonizing our relationship to food, decolonizing our relationship to our culture. Even in the context of quotes, I know in our pre-conversation we touched on the cultural history of quilts. As being significant to the Black American experience, the maps being woven into quotes, and quotes just holding history and being much more than what they would appear to be on the surface, which feels incredibly significant in the context of your work. Additionally, when we look at the pieces as well, especially as we mentioned, Sam Gilliam, the borders of the work and the framing of it seems very, very intentionally speckled with African Ankara fabric. So we had some theories about it, but we'd love to hear from you as to why that artistic decision was made, what the process of that was. It feels very freeing, and it feels very grounding in terms of reconnecting to this experience of Africa within African Americans. Was that intentional? What was the thought process behind that decision?
If I'm honest, this is a question that has been kind of happening a lot more lately for me around, like, why do you use these fabrics? And I think a lot of times that there's a desire for me to have like a deep conversation or like a spiritual reasoning, and there's not. Like, I just really like fabrics that have a lot of colors in them, and the wax print technique leaves a vibrancy in the colors that a lot of other dyeing techniques don't, and it makes the designs really solid. It's different from, you know, batik dyeing or some of the other dyeing processes, and so I'm drawn to the fabrics because of that. But I'm drawn to like a lot of different fabrics. As I'm looking at these, and so like so much so that I don't even, like, I'm having to look and see what fabric I even put around them. And some of the fabrics that are around them are not Ankara fabric. They just come across as Afrocentric because I do. And that's been like a really interesting conversation for me to be thinking about having, because there's this like conversation lately that's come up around my work. I put the frames on them because I think that it just looks better. It finishes the image, and we have so much going on in the pieces that when they're hanging in proximity like this, and there's like some science around like how long people look at paintings when they're in places, and so thinking about like, if somebody's gonna look at your painting from 3 to 15 seconds, that means that they're gonna like move quickly through. And when you have a lot going on and there's nothing that stops it, they merge all the paintings together in their process. And so the frame kind of serves as to like almost like a TV or like a screen. Like, we're all used to kind of looking at screens. So it's more of a like, this idea is composed in this specific space. And when you move into the next space, there's a new idea that is composed within that specific space. But it's brought up like really interesting conversations or interesting thought for me, because I also feel like there's this desire for me to assign like a political or social reason as to why I'm using certain fabrics or using certain things, which is hard for me because I feel like, one, it's hypocritical for me to like sit anywhere and lecture anybody about like labor or how something's made or where it's sourced from, and I have on $300 Nikes and glasses from China and my cell phone and things that we know for a fact displace communities and impact communities, but like I'm not necessarily, so then it calls into question all of these like social issues for me of like, do I want to like lean on that or do I not? And I don't. But I also find it really interesting that like people tend to center the works around the African fabrics, and there's pieces in here that have no African fabric in them. They have calicos, they have lokta papers, they have like even the one that's like right above your head. Her shirt is actually a fabric that I got from Alaska from a Polynesian spot. But my interaction with it breathes that Afrocentric energy imbuement into it. And in doing some of the research, you know, I had done some research a couple of years ago about where pieces of fabric are coming from based on Bisa Butler, because Bisa Butler, that's something that's really important to her in her work. But I think that it's important to her in her work because she's working from historical references. And so it would be in line with these historical references for her to be clear about like, I'm sourcing these. And then her family, she is an African American. So her family there's a place where her people are from. that she goes back to, that is important for her to source her fabrics from that specific place, where that's not the case for me. Where like for me, the main political importance is like I bought it from Black-owned spaces. I bought it, this is from somebody who is from Nigeria. This is from somebody who is from here. I have a friend who lives in Ghana. She sends me a lot of her fabric scraps. But I just really like the patterns. I think they're very pretty. And I think that they're very vibrant, and I'm a very vibrant person. I like a lot of colors. I think that's one thing about like African culture, like Africanness, that is really deeply ingrained in us, regardless of how far from actually like being in Africa that we are. Like there's that sense of vibration of color, and like the joy that brings us is very present. Sorry.
Oh, also get the research about the fabric, where it comes from.
Oh yeah. So then there's this like other level of complexity. A couple of years ago, there's a documentary. I can't remember the name of the documentary off the top of my head. So my allergies are like acting up real bad. I took a lot of Benadryl today, so my brain is moving a little bit slow. But there's a documentary about the roots of the fabrics, and they're Dutch. So the wax printing process and of these type of colors and designs is actually Dutch. So there's like this real complexity in bringing up the question of like, is the use of these fabrics in some way indicating that I am trying to like prove some sort of Africanness, or like, and then do people who are in Africa who use these fabrics, are they trying to prove some sort of Africanness or some sort of Dutchness by using this practice and this fabric practice or this design practice? I was having a conversation earlier with another artist, and we were talking about the difference between like fabric and symbol. Of like, if I put an Adinkra symbol on a painting, it's important for me to know like this symbol means this, because it is very specific and it is very like it means something very clear and specific. Whereas all of these fabrics do not, and there might be assigned meanings based on like the region that maybe moves them around a lot, but there's like a very convoluted conversation around like, who does this wax print belong to and how?
So we were talking in discussion actually this morning, and did some research, and I was researching about the fabric. And so come to find out, there was a Dutch guy, I can't pronounce his name, but he had a company, and the company was trying to recreate what they call batik fabric. And it comes from Indonesia and China. He wanted to find an easier way to make it, because it's a time-consuming process to make it from hand.
If you are an Instagram person, Google how in Indonesia, it's fascinating video because they're stamping it. And it's
So it's a long process.
and you see they have like fabric from wall to wall, and it's just, and your stamp has to be exact. It's so interesting.
So he wanted to make the process easier. So he had factories, they started to produce the work, and Indonesia, and work came from Indonesia and China. And they got mad at him for doing that, so they blackballed him from being able to sell that work in those countries. So what he did was, since Dutch had their hands in Africa, and certain nations, he started to sell those fabrics to the Africans.
So I feel like all that to say that there's a larger political conversation to be had. I don't feel like I'm the person who's necessarily historically equipped or lineage equipped to have it. I feel like somebody who, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, brother, so much for sharing. Truly. We have some questions that kind of seek to kind of explore like the more macro applications of the work. First of all, what is this work a call or is this work a response? Is it both? And in that regard, what is it responding to, who is it calling to?
For me, it's both, because it is a response to a suppression of history and to a I personally am probably a little bit older than most people think I am. And I am tired of the whole, like, you Black Americans don't have any culture. And like that, or your culture is only degenerate shit. And it's like, we have a very rich and vibrant culture on this continent that is important. And when we talk about how imagery is used to suppress how people are seen and how people are growing, so it is a response to that. But then it is also a call to y'all and to everybody else to like reclaim your chicken and watermelon and cornbread. And like, don't let, like, when they are saying to you like, oh, we're gonna have this, when you're at work and they microaggressively have the chicken and watermelon for Black History Month, like, y'all get mad, you storm out, you go to HR, y'all send a bunch of emails like, no, eat the chicken and then get up and tell them why chicken is important to you. Why? Get up and hold the drumstick in the air and be like, yes, this is amazing. I love chicken. And you know why I love chicken? I love chicken because my great-great-grandmother, my 3 generations ago grandmother, who my mother knew, that's how close slavery is to us. My mother knew somebody who was enslaved. It's not a long time ago. 3 generations. That person fried chicken and stood at the side of the train and they bought my family from freedom. And you make the people who are at your job face that. Like, you cannot ridicule me with some chicken. It's ludicrous that you think you could trigger me with chicken when chicken is mine and it always was mine. And it's mine today, it'll be mine tomorrow. I'm about to get some chickens. I'm letting you know now. Build them a tiny house. It's mine. And that's fine. Y'all not about to offend me. Y'all, we get really upset when people try to hurl racial slurs. They be, oh, you watermelon eating? You goddamn right. Because all this watermelon I've been eating is why it bought my family freedom. It put us in a situation where we were using agriculture to be independent and to be on our own. Oh, you slave, you going to work tomorrow for $8 an hour. Who's a slave? Slavery in Washington, D.C., for example, looked just like what everybody does today when they go to work. Slaves in Washington, D.C. were allowed to own property, were allowed to get married, were allowed to buy their loved ones, and they had jobs. They worked for the White House, including the cooks. These are slaves. The person who built the Georgetown Dam was a slave who bought his family for freedom. He worked directly with George Washington. All of the American documents, guess who wrote those? Slaves. So, this is a call to us to do that, to like really learn our history and respond back. And like, y'all don't get to make fun of us. I am not ashamed of chicken. I'm not ashamed of watermelon. I'm not ashamed of the Kool-Aid. Put the sugar in it. Let's do this. That's what we do. And that's important to us. And that's, I think that, so this is a call to me, for everybody, for us to embrace and stand in who we are.
I think we're coming up on our last few questions. My last question is, what is your work's relationship to the future?
Well, I guess she said it best in terms of the future is reclaiming our culture and our heritage and just promoting that worldwide. I'm going to take this show, take it global, from state to state, country to country, and have other folks have more appreciation for the struggle and history of African American people. A lot of people don't take it that seriously when we come outside of our particular states, but we paved the way for a lot of other ethnic communities to be able to stand up for their civil rights. They've watched the blueprint of Martin Luther King. They watched the blueprint of the marches, and they understand, the importance of being able to come together as a community and how much all these other countries who have been oppressed have looked to Black America to see how do we fight this oppression. We made the blueprint for that.
agree, and I would say I'm really invested in, particularly in America, like the movement towards us being able to define ourselves as us in a way that isn't. I think a lot of times that we've not been allowed to be like, I'm me. And there's always this pushback of like, well, where are you gonna go back to? And what are you gonna, and like, I think that that's disrespectful to me, but it's also disrespectful to like, I think one of you guys said you were first generation Nigerian American. And like, that is African American, and that is a very specific experience. And it's a very rich experience that has its own value to it, where I don't have a Nigeria to go back to. I don't have my family on, like, Thanksgiving is important to us, and not because of pilgrims or nothing. It's because everybody got the day off, and whoever makes the best macaroni and cheese, that's like an honor to us. Like, and you know, when you think about, like, that's one thing about our culture, to me, that's really beautiful. It's like Thanksgiving, when the elder woman of the family says, you get to make the macaroni and cheese this year. That's a rite of passage, and that is very special to us. And so I think about my work in the future as being able to talk about my culture and how beautiful my culture is, the same way that, like, when you talk about your culture and how beautiful your culture is, like, and I love that. Like, I want to hear about, like, what y'all be cooking, what y'all got on, you going to this. I was watching Love is Blind. I'll be watching that. I was watching Love is Blind. And then, you know, like, watching the Nigerian brother, and he had her do the, like, what's it called, the gele, the head wraps and stuff, and like, that was so beautiful. And like, her talking to like all the moms and the aunties, and they was like sharing all these things with her about, like, in their culture, it's traditional to do this, it's traditional to do that. And so, like, that's how I want my art to serve, is like 3 generations from now, I want somebody to, like, be able to pull up this picture and be like, oh, like, this is traditional for them to do this, it was traditional for them to do that. This is their culture. Like, my grandkids, when they come over, you know, I make bomb macaroni and cheese. And I'm trying to teach my oldest right now, because I'm like, look, yo, you gotta take this, you know, to the next generation. But like, I want the work to serve as kind of a blueprint for those coming generations about how we take back our culture and we celebrate our culture.
Ashe, I want to say Ashe because that's beautiful. That's a beautiful vision. So we're gonna open it up to y'all, because I know that y'all have questions, because this has been a really rich conversation. So thank you to the both of you. Genuinely feel like I've learned a lot, and I've been privileged to sit with this work for a couple weeks now. So thank you. Yeah, and with that, let's give them a round of applause. And if you have any questions, I can, you know, I'm just gonna give you my mic, unless you're good at projecting. Any reflections? How this work makes you feel?
I have a reflection, especially around because I originally kind of researched some of the things around the watermelon, right? And how it was because our ancestors were able to utilize that crop and buy freedom and make money to survive. It then became a thought of how do we create a mockery around it so that you become embarrassed by it. And I think that's the importance to me of thinking about the fact that you all featured watermelon fried chicken and cornbread. You know, I make some really good cornbread, but anyway. But just the fact that, you know, researching that and understanding, you know, I grew up in Tuskegee, Alabama, so town created by free black slaves. So I had a different perspective from my husband, even though his family came to Ohio from Alabama, because I grew up there for my early years. And so, and being able to see my grandfather, who had a 200-acre farm, and be able to see those trucks and watermelon. So when I see one on Georgia Avenue, I get really excited. But just knowing that history was a part, even as I'm over 60 years old, understanding that the reason it was made to create these caricatures around it was to deter people from actually continuing to use it to benefit us and create the wealth and build that wealth for our families.
That's a fact. And I'm sure everybody in this room knows this, and I'm preaching to the choir, but I think that extends to all art forms pioneered by Blacks from that point forward. Like when you look at hip hop right now, and you look at like what is the content of what you hear on the radio, and then you start to think back to like when did they usurp this? When was there a transition? Because there was a point when this was like an authentic voice of the community, and then there was a point when it became a directed way to infiltrate the community. So I think it's in our best interest to start to like look at these patterns as they reoccur around the popularity of our culture. Like right now we're watching like they're using our language and incorrectly and embarrassingly, constantly, and just being like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. Like you have a Black friend who doesn't have any Black friends, and are getting this and are living this life that you see on TV that has nothing to do with what we actually are doing, which is cooking these foods and eating these foods and coming up with businesses and like the strong spirit of entrepreneurism, I don't know if that's a word, but that exists in our community.
I saw another hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I recently came to the realization that watermelon is probably one of the healthiest fruits you can actually eat.
Yeah.
And even the seeds are supposed to be good. So I always look for a seed of watermelon.
Very true.
A fun fact about watermelon is that watermelon has been used by enslaved people in multiple cultures because it has the highest content of water, and so, thusly watermelon. But it helps people stay hydrated when they're working in environments that are like high sun, and even to this day it helps replenish. So there's like a health aspect to it. Palestinians use watermelon as a symbol of resistance. And so like there's these, watermelon is a really important iconographic symbol across cultures of freedom and resistance.
I'm glad you touched on that because I was thinking about the same thing and how watermelon is a huge part of like Black culture, Black food. And growing up, I never felt like I love watermelon. And I never felt like an outcast, or because I grew up with so many other cultures enjoying watermelon too. And so when I went to college, it was like my first time I was around a lot of Asian people. They love watermelon. Like anytime there's a gathering, they bring out the watermelon. And seeing that, like this art, different cultures can see that, or relate to, and I think that's what makes it beautiful as well. This is something, like you said, a lot of people of color can relate to outside of the United States. And so, yeah, I think this work can be appreciated by a lot of different people, and which just adds even more depth to it. So.
Yeah, I just want to add that where I'm from, we use watermelon in our skincare as well. That's just
Cool. Where are you from?
Senegal and Gambia.
Cool.
And watercolor in Africa is a summer, regular food that we eat. On a regular basis, you find it on the road, you find it cut, you just get it for, scent, and this is a normal thing. But I can tell you my experience with, I came when I was 21 here, and I've lived about 5-6 years without even knowing and understanding the story of watermelon. But it was because of the community that I was surrounded with. They never talked about it. But I was confronted once when I was eating watermelon on the beach. A group of white people came and started laughing at me.
Oh, wow.
I didn't even understand what the situation was. I started laughing with them because I didn't understand what was going on. But I was extremely curious to come and see this work and learn from you guys, because it is a thing that the minute I heard it, actually, I was so angry that I started eating watermelon in front of my friends. So, sometimes it's difficult when it becomes political to how to translate it in art. I always have a difficulty doing that, because quite often the translation is either seen as a negative, like something that you cannot see, even though the storyline is true, you know, and you cannot express it in a different way. So I'm so happy and thrilled to see this. Thank you for bringing it up to us.
Can I say something else? When you brought up the Palestinians, right? So I don't know how many people in the room understand the utilization of the watermelons again. They were the artists. They were forbidden to make pictures in the colors of create art in the colors of their flag. So the symbol of freedom became the watermelon. So that's why you see the watermelon represented, because it's all about freedom. And if you think about how it's connected to our ancestors, and the fact that it was also connected to our freedom, you know. So I think, you know, and the fact that they also they showed tremendous support for Black Lives Matters and everything. When that time when George Floyd was killed, there were murals over in Palestine were drawn specifically during that time and to show their support. So it became that symbol. That was the only thing they could think of, was as far as their rebellion as artists, was to paint the watermelon.
They will walk around town holding the water, because their flag is red, black, and green, just like the Black American flag. And so once the artists were banned from using those colors, walking through town with the watermelon, that was a sign of revolution. And that's like also, you know, it's interesting to think about, like if I walk through a plantation holding my watermelon, like this is revolution.
I don't know if this was mentioned earlier, but I remember the year Tiger Woods won his first Masters, and I guess the tradition is that the winner picks the menu for the dinner for the next year. And Fuzzy Zeller mentioned that what was Tiger Woods going to pick chicken and collard greens and stuff like that. So I thought it stirred a lot of negative emotions, but I thought it welcomed or invited a great conversation. So in my own life, growing up, my dad's a retired chef, so I used to always hear my mother and father mention that New Year's Eve, which is approaching, what we were going to have for dinner, and black-eyed peas, collard greens, some form of pork, and cornbread. And they would talk about, and I would hear my mother say, you know, cornbread represents gold or wealth, collard greens, some money, the pork, we move forward, progress. And so I thought it was interesting that as a child, I really didn't listen to it much, but I had to plan an assignment for a group of high schoolers in the city, and I called it Signals of Hope. And it was interesting because it gave me an opportunity to talk about food, but we also talked about scripture and talked about, even in the Bible, bitterness represented those days where God may appear distant or far off, and the sweet water representing God was close and active. So I think this conversation is great because we get to engage about food and what it represents, that it's more than just, at times it can be more than just eating. You dine with your eyes. So thank you for this conversation.
And y'all know that those traditions that you just named are rooted in hoodoo. That's hoodoo. That's us doing our magic to bring forth this good fortune for the year. So the ways that we engage our food is spiritual. And you have to really think about that, like when you're preparing your meals. And I think that's something that's big for us as families anyway. It's like, you know, we talk about how your energy got to be right before you prepare your meals for folks. That's very important for us in our households. Our interaction with food is spiritual. And so thinking about that, like when we let people represent us and our food in a certain way, they are lacking the spiritual connections that we have to our food and to our cultural history. And it's okay for us to take it back. And Tiger Woods should have. He should have said it's going to be macaroni and cheese, watermelon, collard greens, potato salad. And let them mark some non-cooking somebody up in there to make it, you know. So there's a food critic and historian, Michael Twiggy, or Twiggy. And he has a whole practice around reclaiming the colonization of our food histories. So he's most known for, he penned a letter to Paula Deen because she had her like great Southern cooking. and was like, in your presentation of this book, you skip past the root of the history of these recipes that you're so-called sharing. And that's unacceptable. Like, you have to acknowledge who created these recipes. Black baked, we were talking earlier today about baked macaroni and cheese is specifically a black created recipe. It don't have nothing to do with Paula Deen and her people. It has to do with a White House chef who went to France for further training, learning how to bake those dishes, decided, like, let me bake the macaroni and cheese. So the practice of actually baking it is Black American. It's ours. It belongs to us. Somebody cannot take it away. I was in a conversation one time. They was like, "Oh, but the Koreans fried chicken so much better." You know why Koreans fried chicken like that? Because of black folks. In the Korean-American War, going to Korea and teaching them how it is that we like to fry chicken. And there's fried chicken in all cultures. Many cultures fry chicken, but there's a way that we do it. And there's a way that, and that doesn't take away from anybody else's way that they do it or anybody else's culture. Because I think that's the other polarizing thing that happens when you start to talk about, like, Black American. It's like, if I say it's Black American, that means that there's no importance of any other culture, or we're wiping out connections or history to other cultures. And it's like, no, but there's specific things that we have done. I'm 7 generations deep here. There's things that we've done here that are very specific to here and that have spread out into other places, or even if it's influenced by another place but was cultivated here, and that matters. It's important. And reparations, y'all.
I want to give the space for the two of you to share any upcoming projects, any upcoming shows. This is a little bit of time for you guys to share anything with the audience in terms of how to keep up with your work.
Wow, he's finding his long list because he's about to be everywhere. DC, Ohio, Philadelphia. He's popping. I'm not popping right now. I'm in grad school. I'm very tired. It's a lot to, like, go to grad school and have kids. And I should have done, this is like a 20-year-old thing. Whew, it's a lot. But I don't think I have anything super coming up. Oh, we have a party on December 16th at our studio in Georgetown at the Fillmore. I just sent an e-blast out, but if you follow our website, terrelartsdc.com, it'll be on there. It's not on there right now because I'm tired. But if you subscribe to the website, I sent out an e-blast for it. I'm excited this year. Usually it's a fundraiser for us to continue to do, we do a lot of community artwork, and we try to keep it affordable, and then we try to allow people to be able to come for free. And so usually we charge for, it's a $5 donation that goes towards getting supplies so people can just come for free. But this year it has generously been paid for by SR Evermain, who maintains a studio space. So, and they gave us money to make sure that we could continue to have our workshops and continue to allow people to attend for free, which is a blessing. So it's going to be popping this year. I don't even know how we're going to outdo that next year. Because it's going to be, we got food. We always get the good drinks. We got food. There's going to be vendors. Our band will be there. Our band was here for the opening. Oh, we have some jewelry vendors, face painting for kids, massage and body work. We'll have her chair and table there. And so these are all like local people. So if you come out, you can do some Christmas shopping. You can tour the studios of several of the artists that are in the building and find out more about the Fillmore School and SNR Evermain's programming for artists that they're really trying to solidify here. If you come to that, please, when you go up, if you see any of the people there, go up to them and let them know like what a gem we are to the community, because we really want to like continue to cultivate that relationship with them and continue to build that relationship with them. They have space and a willingness, and that's important. But it's also important that they know that, you know, it matters, and we have to advocate for people who are really working for the community. Oh, it's free parking in Georgetown. Like, yay, how can you do that, right? right, so here's superstar James S. Terrell's ridiculous list. It's y'all are about to be like, this is ridiculous.
No, but I did overbook the last 2 months. I didn't realize it. But so I have a show coming up at the Columbus Cultural Arts Center. It opens up on November 18th, and then have an exhibition at the Liberty Museum in January. It opens up till April. And then I have a show in DC at the Helium, which opens up on December 5th. The artist talk with December 9th. And then I have a show again in Niagara Falls area in March.
But he's not even telling y'all the truth. He's all, oh, I would need a show here. That show at the Niagara College, if you're an artist, who's an artist in here? Raise your hand. That show is him and Joseph Albers, the color blocking theorist, like the Joseph Albers. He's the pioneer of color theory, period. He's doing the show with him. He's dead, Joseph Albers. Like, that's how much of a pioneer he is. It's like that he's dead. Like, this is in the Smithsonian. He's in the Smithsonian's like permanent collection style, and he don't even say all that. He's always like, oh, I just have a little show here, a little show there. So I'm an Aries. I like to brag. I'll brag on his behalf because I sure do. Have y'all seen the Joy Luck Club? Remember when her daughter won the chess championship and she was on the cover of the magazine and she was walking around holding the magazine in front of her? That's how I be feeling about you.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for sharing so much with us today.
Also, thank you to the Art Noise for having us. We really appreciate that, Mr. Adrian. And everyone else as well. Thank you.
Women, you make it happen. Y'all laughing like I can't shrink all your sweaters.
No, please don't forget that there are food and drinks in the back, so please help yourself. And again,
And buy stuff. Because,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you buy stuff from the gallery gets a percentage and the artists get a percentage. But that percentage is what keeps these doors open. So it is imperative that you buy something. And if you are a person who is here who's like, I don't quite have the money to buy a painting, but I will next year when I get my tax check, because we get a lot of that. That's great, and we love that. But when you hit us up, if you want to buy something, make sure that you reference that you saw us here, because we pay out the gallery if you want to buy a piece later after a show closes. We are very, 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 and we do payment plans. I think y'all do payments too.
Yes, we do.
The gallery does payments as well. But we make sure as artists that we're ethical about how we practice. So please, like, if you reach out to us in 6 months and you want this piece, it was still available, be like, I saw it at Art of Noise, so that we know that we need to pay out the gallery.